If you ask me the number one reason for failure in CELPIP writing and speaking for students, that is one thing where people are shocked. Why did I score low? And that is called the task response. This is more scary than you think because if you don't resonate with the examiner on your ideas, you lose marks. Easy way to fix it. So let's have a look at this CELPIP speaking question, sample answer, and diagnose this. Then we'll look at a writing sample answer and see where these mistakes happen and more importantly, how can you prevent them from happening? The question is question 2. Talk about your biggest achievement. You can mention something that happened in school, at work, or even something within your family that you did and were really proud of. Basically, talk about a big achievement. So here's the answer, and feel free to figure out what marks this student will get, because I will tell you later what marks this student will actually score. The answer is, my biggest achievement was winning a race at my school's annual sports event. This was a very big deal for me. There were too many people, including my parents, on the seats, and everyone was watching the competitors. I was very unsure if I was going to win. The bell rung and we all started running. You can see it's all small sentences. I ultimately won. Okay, this was my biggest achievement. Now, let's stop here before we go further. My biggest problem is there are all these small sentences. They're not complex, and there's not a mixture or a range. It's just small sentence after small sentence. It was a big deal for me. There were too many people. This is slightly big. This is okay. I wasn't sure if I was going to win. The bell rung, and we ran, and I won. It's very small descriptions without any place emphasizing why or how. Is there a definition, a background behind it? No. And this continues to happen. I could never believe it if you asked me many years ago if I would win this race. We're getting somewhere. But now I feel proud to reflect at that moment. Perfect. Very good. Now I would love to hear why this person says, I could never believe it if you asked me many years ago if I was going to win. But he does not explain that. Instead, he goes to saying, everyone, including my family, was very happy with me. It's a completely different point. They said encouraging words to me that I remember to this day. It was an awesome feeling. I also received an award. I keep that award with me to this day. There's no grammar mistakes. The vocabulary level is okay. It's not advanced. But most importantly, there is no connector, there is no range, there is no task response, and that's where the student will lose most of the marks. In terms of explaining the biggest achievement, that is explained. But is there a background? More importantly, the two things you want to ask yourself is there a why or how? Is there a reasoning behind everything he is saying? The answer is no. And because of that, this speaking will score a maximum of 7, or if the examiner is being generous, 8. The reason it won't score 9+ is because if you are saying, I feel proud to reflect at that moment, you have to explain why. If you are saying this was a big deal for me, you have to explain why. And you need details, not in every sentence, but in most. Here's a refined version of the same answer that'll give you a much better score, and everything in yellow is where the task response shines, because now we're explaining the why and how. Let's have a look at this answer. As far as I recall, my biggest achievement ever has to be competing in a race during my high school years against some of the city's top players. Good start. Long, complex sentence. I clearly remember the task seemed. Now here we're explaining how it seemed. Not why here, but how. It seemed arduous, which means very difficult, given the fact that I was never a runner or athletic for that matter. This is here it says arduous, which is how the task was, and given the fact that this is the reasoning why it was arduous. So if I just finish my sentence at arduous, or I said it was difficult, that would be a problem. There's no explanation why it was difficult, and that's the problem that was happening all over this previous answer. But here you can see we're explaining. If we're saying arduous, we're saying because we were never a runner or athletic in that regard. Next sentence goes on to say, in fact, I was always at the bottom 3 in races nonetheless, and then it continues. You can see we're still kind of building on that idea. that we explained later, and now there's coherence as well. It's not just a bunch of random small sentences, one after the other, but it's a whole story now, because you're explaining the reasoning behind everything. Now it goes on to say, nonetheless, what I remember focusing on, and look at this process, prior to the race, is intense exercises and drills. I would get up at 6 a.m. every day and just run until I could hardly breathe. This was to build my stamina. I also took up cycling to build up my leg strength. This is the process, how this guy prepared for this race. Here we're talking about the how. Here we were mainly talking about why, now we're talking about how. We're fully answering everything that we are explaining. Next, to everyone's surprise but myself, the race began with me in the lead and ended up the exact same way. Finally, an underdog like me was able to deliver a highly unexpected outcome. So we're not just saying that we were able to deliver, we're again tying this in with our ideas that this was unexpected, for which I'm highly proud. And again, this goes back to the question, talk about your biggest achievement, you're proud of that, you had this achievement. Everything now flows really well. And because after everything we said, we're asking ourselves why and how and explaining that, it is a more refined answer. It has more complex and long sentences as well as short sentences. Most importantly, it gives you marks for a task response. So make sure to ask yourself why and how. Now let's have a look at this writing question. Task 2. The question was about having this extra space in your office, and we have two options. We could either create a gym in the office or create an indoor green space in the office. So this is a sample answer, and then there's more paragraphs, but I picked the first two here for you. In my opinion, a green space should be built. That is the introduction the student made. Now, the body 1 says there are already so many gyms around, so we should instead build a green space. I kid you not, I see this like 7 out of 10 times in reasoning from students, and I really don't like this point because it's very common. Everybody says that. Instead, I would explain the benefits of green space here and talk about nature and meditation and so on. But if you have to say this, there's a much better way you can say this and get your marks for a task response. So you will see all the editing is in uppercase here. First of all, in your opinion, give some reasoning. A green space should be built considering the social benefits. And the idea here is those benefits will be explained later. So we are making our intro specific, and you don't have to give details here. Intro is just very short, considering social benefits, economic benefits, health benefits, so on. And now let's look at this sentence again. There are already so many gyms around, so we should instead build a green space. Now, before I say secondly, I gotta stop and continue explaining what I just said. You can't just move on, continue explaining first. Given the situation, like the situation that we have so many gyms, we wouldn't want to oversaturate an existing service, especially if it'll just be another similar facility with not much of an edge over existing gyms. Look, it's obvious you have too many gyms, but you have to explain it to the examiner as if they were a 5-year-old baby. You have to give your definition. Why? So you have many gyms, and that's why we have oversaturation. And again, it's just going to be another gym without offering anything extra. And that's how you explain why or how. So when you write or speak the next time in your task, make sure to ask yourself why or how if you give a point and go into detail. The more descriptive you are, the more marks you will hit for task response as well as vocabulary. Guys, that's it for this video. Please like, share, and subscribe. Also, check out our CELPIP 15-hour course in the description for guaranteed results.